Lily Kazemi with DowFitLife.com, and today we are going to talk about doing walking Zoom calls, how to decide when it's appropriate to do them, and how to do it effectively while still being respectful of your colleagues. So, walking while doing meetings is not a new concept. Actually, Steve Jobs, when he was at Apple, popularized the walking meeting, and it sort of caught on as you may have experienced in the office, walking with colleagues to go grab coffee and talking about whatever business issues there may be there. Now that we're at home more, there's a similar opportunity to get cardio workout that you may not have time for to carve out separately during the day and also participate in a call. So the first question you have to ask is this the right circumstance to walk and be on Zoom or Google Hangouts? And both of these apparatus, also with Microsoft Teams too, they have an option where you can simply dial to join by phone, or they both have all of them have an app that you can actually download on your phone, so you have better visibility into seeing who's in the meeting, and it also just shows, at least your avatar, so you're not completely just showing a phone. So in the instance when you're trying to decide whether you should actually walk for this meeting or not, here's a couple of my guidelines. And these are only my personal opinions. They don't represent that of any professional organization. But what I have learned is that if you are speaking to your supervisor one-on-one, or to a colleague or client you're meeting for the first time, or if you're speaking to someone about a sensitive topic, you probably want to opt out of doing the walking. So those are some circumstances where you want to stay in front of the camera and you don't necessarily want to be walking. And when you think about it, the same thing kind of applies in person. If there are conversations that you should have face-to-face, then keep it face-to-face as it translates onto cameras. Now, there's also a lot of opportunities you have, though, to walk where, your face and your appearance isn't as crucial. And a couple of examples are these, like large, all hands team calls, or even if you're on a smaller team, regular check-in calls, calls where you may be talking to a colleague that you do have a good rapport with, or calls that are like training calls where there's just slides being projected and you're just there to essentially learn something. All of those are instances where it is probably okay to try to walk. So I have a couple of tips if there is a chance you may speak, or if you actually are speaking. So in the situation where it's a team call, it's a group of people you regularly do interact with, if you need to speak, I would first give everyone the heads up, when you join or when it's your turn to speak, that you're walking and there may be some background noise. That's just a way of being respectful to your colleagues. Also, if you're in a situation where you're talking to a colleague one-on-one and you feel like you have a close rapport, what I like to do is give them a heads up that I'm thinking of walking while I do the call with them, and that way they can also take the opportunity if they want to walk while they do the call. Like, I've had that happen many times, and we both end up feeling good about ourselves and having a good conversation. So planning is really key. And what I like to do is go through my calendar through the day, look at the calls I have scheduled, and I kind of mark which ones are appropriate for Zoom walking, I like to call it. And I'll make sure that I have everything set up and good to go when the call starts. Obviously, you'd want to, if you're walking outside or if you're walking on a treadmill that's, for example, in an apartment building you live in, you want to make sure that you actually leave, several minutes in advance of the call. You want to be on time for the call. That kind of etiquette is very important when you're choosing to do calls this way. Now, I also have a couple of tips for the actual background noise and how to minimize it. So if you're outside, everything is not necessarily in your control. If you're in a suburban area, you can't control if someone decides to turn on a weed whacker or a lawnmower while you're walking. You can, just to the best extent you can, cross the street or go in an area where you're not walking right past someone's yard and can't control the noise. If you're in an urban area, like I'm in DC, I try not to go near where I know there's construction sites, or I live near a fire station. I try not to walk near there because there's a very high chance there will be a screaming ambulance or fire truck. Generally try to go away from high traffic, either car or people areas. And so that can be harder to navigate, but it definitely is possible if you do some test runs and have some practice with it on the less critical calls. Now, let me give some tips about treadmills, because I know I've had a lot of experience doing this myself, but also being an observer. So when you're on a treadmill, I wouldn't really advise keeping the camera on the whole time to face you while you're on the treadmill, because it kind of looks like this. And that can be very distracting. I mean, if you really want to have a personal touch to it, just turn on the camera when you're first joining, when the treadmill is not moving, and just say hello and just say, hey guys, I'm going to be on a treadmill. But there's no need for us to watch you, sway back and forth. The other thing about the treadmill is the acoustics. So you want to make sure, especially if you could be on like an older treadmill, that it's not so rickety and squeaky and noisy in the background that it's going to distract your colleagues. So have a test run with a friend or maybe your significant other on a call. Just see how it sounds and how you may be able to minimize the noise. The last tip I will give about the treadmill is also make sure that you are walking at a comfortable walking pace where you can also talk. You know how they say that with exercise? They say, to get to this heart rate zone, you want to be able to walk and talk. So that's pretty important because you don't want to sound too huffy or puffy. That doesn't sound very professional. So that sums up all my tips I will give about walking during Zoom calls. It's definitely possible. It's definitely workable. You can plan out your day in advance, so you can definitely get, a good half hour to 45 minutes or maybe an hour worth of cardio and feel great and still get a lot of your work done, even if you don't have the time for a separate workout. So I have that and more hacks on my dowfitlife.com site. I encourage you to visit that and subscribe, and I will see you next time.